Welcome to episode 245 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton. I'm again joined by Francesc Tomas, Barca columnist featured on ESPN and BarcaBlind.com creator. And Francesc, rumor has it that we are going to be talking about Barcelona B for the entire show today. Well, I might do that, so I'm glad you're here to talk about the first team with me.
Hola, culés. Yes. None of us watch any Cadiz games or any PSG. I don't know who those people are. So yeah, let's talk about L'Hospitalet.
Well, actually, the B team is a good place to start. It's not the entire show, but I want to start with a quick point about the B team. And I promise we're going to get to Cadiz and all of that negativity in a minute. But I did want to start on a positive note. As you mentioned, Barcelona B did wallop on Hospitalet yesterday to the tune of 6-0. Collado, that being Alex Collado, had goals 5 and 6 in the match. EX Moriba scored a screamer. Alejandro Balde. These are all names that you've heard before here on our show for the first team. Balde was extremely influential at left back. Even Arnau Tenas, the promising goalkeeper, was as good when called upon in net as expected to be as a teenage goalkeeper. Arnau Camas, the center back we've been speaking about, added a goal and was solid defensively. Unfortunately, Ander Oriana, who I've spoken about as a potential, we'll say, replacement for Sergio Busquets, and I say that as loosely and vaguely as possible. But even though he was injured, Nico Gonzalez, who usually plays an attacking midfielder, did well moving back to that pivot role. And Carlos de la Fuente had an assist in that match, and he's still looking to get his scoring boots this season. But still, he looked promising and found some space in the match. So all these players we've spoken about as earning minutes with the first team, or at least deserving a minute with the first team this year, and being too good for the third division, that all kind of came to fruition sans Conrad in that match. And all of them fulfilled that promise that they deserve some minutes with the first team. It's good to see. That's a good thing. And what makes sense why Koeman, and I think it makes sense that Koeman wanted to keep those players that needed to exercise the demons of PSG on the field against Cadiz, especially since the league was still very possible at the start of the match, that being before Barcelona dropped points. In particular, in the case of Iash, he's already debuted in the Copa and the Liga. So why have him sit on the bench instead of letting him getting minutes, as what has been the case with Conrad? 1 goal for Conrad this season and almost 600 minutes since the last one. So I'm the one who's always saying play the kids. And you and I have been speaking it in recent weeks, Francesc. We have to play the kids. And I think that definitely applies to the teenagers and kids in the first team. Dest, Puz, Miguetha. Heck, I mean, Mateus Fernandez is still just sitting around waiting for his opportunity, even though he's, 23 at this point or 22. But I'm not so sold on throwing B teenagers into the first team mess right after PSG. Maybe later when things are a bit more sorted in April and May, and the team isn't coming off a loss to PSG. So all that, Francesc, I know you didn't necessarily watch that exciting B team match, but I needed to get those good vibes in. I needed to get that PSG weight lifted off me, so the B team helped with that. And I know we're going to discuss how Koeman did with the Cadiz match as for the rest of the show, and the things he got wrong there. But I want to ask first and foremost, in this idea of playing the kids, did he get it right by not calling up a few of the Barca B youngsters? Or would you say, regardless of all their injuries, they just can play anybody, some Joe Schmo, some kid from 16, 17-year-old, and that Koeman really should have just gone for a youth revolution after PSG?
Right. I want to paraphrase someone who is John Toshak, which most people, I guess, have heard of. He was a coach of Real Madrid back in the 1990s. And please bear with me because this is going somewhere. And I have mentioned this in the podcast before, probably a couple of years back. So Toshak was a coach that was always under pressure at Real Madrid, obviously not Spanish, which obviously in the Spanish capital sort of gives you a pass a lot of the time. And he had 11 starters basically, and he had basically no one in the bench or no one of quality on the bench. And there is this sentence that is very famous in Spain now, which is los 11 cabrones, los mismos 11 cabrones, which means, I won't translate that into English, but the 11 not that lovely people that played last week. And basically the story is that he said that after a loss on the previous week, he wants to change all 11 of them. Then they do a couple of days of training and he thinks, well, okay, maybe I'll play, I don't know, Salgado or whoever it was, or Chendo, or Michel, or Butragueño, or some of those. And then, long story cut short, by the end of the week, he feels the same 11 because basically he's got no one else. And this is basically what happened here. I mean, the PSG match, we recorded the podcast right after. I'm sure that most people listen to this podcast, listen to the previous. And if you haven't, go back and see how we felt at the time. But it was a match that we did worse than we thought we were going to. It was a disappointing loss, and football showed us that Barca is not ready to compete at European level. Now, there are two ways that a coach could go about that. The coach could say, okay, so let's just throw all of these guys out because they're all useless, or which is in hindsight probably what he should have done. But other people would say, actually, no, this was the best 11 that I decided for arguably the most important match of the season. If I show trust on these players, it means because I really did trust them. And they did really badly against PSG in Europe. Everyone saw. So you know what? I'm going to give them another chance. They're going to play against Cadiz, who we know is a team that traditionally parks the bus, especially this season. And they seem to be doing that quite well, to be honest. And then hopefully those 11 players that have fielded, they will go and improve, and they will prove everyone wrong. They will get the morale back, and it's a win-win-win for everything and for everyone. Now, I don't think he expected Cadiz to come out the way he did. And even if he expected that, he really didn't think that a lot of players in the starting 11 would just throw the towel before it's even, the game has even started. It should have been a game for a reaction. It should have been a great occasion for reivindicar, so for players to prove their worth, to say that actually, no, we messed up in midweek. It was a mistake, and we're going to go up in La Liga. Obviously, Atletico Madrid, we didn't think they were going to drop any points, but they are beginning to do so. Obviously, La Liga, in Koeman's eyes, what's he going to say? It's still possible. I still believe it's not, but there you go. I'm happy that the coach is optimistic, and that's what he needs to do with the players. You cannot really say to the players, there's nothing to fight for here. But no, fielding the same 11 was a mistake, because there's still a lot of people in there that are not up to scratch, that are not up to the level. And they seem to, within literally, it's quite alarming to be honest, but within 10 days, it seems that their confidence and morale that was skyrocketing before the PSG match is sort of hitting rock bottom again. And something needs to happen for this to change. And I'm just not sure, like we said in the show after PSG, that Busquets, Pique, Alba, arguably even Messi aren't up to the challenge anymore. So we'll see.
Yeah, it was an odd thing because the disappointment after Cadiz, and again, we spoke about it on the show a few days ago, the disappointment thing about, or rather PSG, was that Barcelona just didn't have the talent. That it was, again, as you said so eloquently from Catalan radio, that Barcelona just aren't good enough. And it's an understanding that Barcelona cannot compete with the best of Europe. And the irony there is that PSG got dismantled by Monaco 2-0 yesterday. So it's not like PSG is this all-dominant force either in France. They're currently third in their table. All that said about PSG, they have an eye. And as I keep mentioning, all the pressure from their ownership group comes about winning the Champions League, where they can win as many league on tables last decade as they want. But if they don't win that Champions League, there is still disappointment. There are still managers in and out of PSG at somehow just as fast or faster a rate as Barcelona. That's how quickly they change their manager. Same thing even with the likes of Chelsea, the ones who have these ownership, particularly their singular owners or ownership groups that demand accountability and demand victories in European competition where the brand is most valuable. And all that said about Spanish football, not to even let Barcelona off the hook at all, but all the other Spanish clubs, with the exception of Granada, who did really well in the Europa League, Real Sociedad, Sevilla, Barcelona, they were all keeping the ball, had a ton of possession, getting a lot of opportunities, but they were all outclassed by opponents that were willing to give you the ball and use their superior either athleticism or their just superior finishing talent up front. And that being Real Sociedad against Manchester United. The mighty Manchester United going, hey, Real Sociedad, La Real, here's the ball, take it, you do your Spanish football thing, and then we'll sit back and worry about it later. Same thing. Dortmund is like, hey, we have Erling Haaland to run at you, so we're just going to hang out, wait for you to give us the ball, and then we'll run at you as fast as possible. And Sevilla obliged. And they tried to come back a little bit, but that was an exciting match too. Barcelona, unfortunately, to PSG, who I think we'll say the more all-conquering of the three, but Barca were also the more outclassed of all three of the Spanish sides in that instance. We'll see how Real Madrid does. As weird as it is, Real Madrid is trying to represent some positivity for Spanish football. And we'd love to see if Real Madrid wound up losing 6-0 or 5-0 or whatever it may be. It's almost an indictment of Spanish football that it seems that the challenges of counterattacking football, which is running rampant everywhere in the world with these best teams, Spain just doesn't really have that, right? That whether you're at the top, other than Real Madrid, no other team in Spain really does counterattack at a high level. The only other one in Spain that really does so is Levante. And Levante, with their attack, we'll say their pressure and then their willingness to counterattack after sitting back was what had Atletico Madrid drop points twice this week. So it's just been interesting to see for me in Europe how the style that Barcelona is not used to seeing at an elite level is the very style that teams are using against Barcelona to overwhelm them. In a way that Bayern could have really done anything they wanted. I mean, that was 8-2. But against PSG, they just had the style that perfectly matched up against all the wonderful weaknesses that Barcelona have. And now, for the league, I also want to mention, too, that in league, yes, even though Barcelona are long shots to win it, you still mathematically have to be bought in. And it's not Koeman's job. Again, his job is up for grabs. It is his job not to give up on the league. You can maybe give up on Champions League at this point, and he's kind of said as such that he said, I don't have the exact quote, but it was a matter of this is going to be very, very difficult, which is a coach kind of tipping his hat to say, I don't know how.
He literally said, I watched the press conference in Spanish. He literally said, I can lie to you, but overcoming a 4-goal deficit, when you lose 1-4 at home, overcoming the deficit is virtually impossible. That's what he said.
Yep. Yeah. And so he knew also in the pre-game conference before, or the pre-match conference before the match against Cadiz, that they could have cut it to 6, but it remains at 8 for up to Atletico Madrid at the top. They still have a game in hand on Real Madrid, as do Barcelona, but Zidane is now only 3 points behind. So worst case, non-Barca related scenario, obviously, is that Real Madrid wins the Liga over Atletico Madrid. I think that'll put more even pressure, especially as we keep saying it's going to be Laporta in about 2.5 weeks' time. So, I mean, yeah, we're about to have a presidential election, so there is some positivity coming in a few weeks. Just wait. But to the point that if Real Madrid winds up winning La Liga this season, it makes it even worse for reasons that I know we don't care. If Barca isn't winning, I don't care. It's obviously a bummer if Real Madrid wins, just like they did last season when they came back from the pandemic break and they went off on all those wins. So if Real Madrid does win the Liga, that's worse than Atletico Madrid winning. Yep. It's going to put even more pressure on the new president. It's going to put even more pressure on the players. And Barcelona continues to be a pressure cooker. Yeah, and so it winds up being an issue. And Barca also 6 points ahead of Real in 5th. So that's not really safe either. But I would expect that 3rd or 4th place with Sevilla are much more possible than getting up to 1st or falling out of the top 4.
Yeah. You've said a lot of points. I really don't have that much to add. To be honest, today, I'm a little bit all over the place. I'm disappointed.
Can I target that disappointment with a question for you? Is it disappointing for Cadiz because the league is still in play? As in, if Barca were still 12 points behind Atletico Madrid, do you think yesterday would have been less disappointing, or is it merely just looking at PSG and that is why that match was disappointing? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. The question makes perfect sense. I think that it's not disappointing based on anyone else but ourselves. I think that Barca should have been, especially after the PSG defeat, they should have gone out biting. They should have gone out biting on the PSG game anyway. But once you've really messed that up, this game should have been at least a 4 or 5-0. This is what Barca needed. This is what Barca could do. And this is not what happened. I mean, in Spanish football, it's always Barca against Madrid. And you've already sort of hinted that. The years that Deportivo La Coruña won La Liga or Valencia or even the Atletico Madrid years, I wasn't really that bothered. I wasn't really that cross. I wasn't happy that Barca didn't win it. But then again, even if we don't win, if Madrid don't, then, good luck to Valencia. They did really well those couple of years that they won it back in the early 2000s, I think it was. And I wasn't really that cross. And even, the Ligas that we won with Deportivo La Coruña pushing until the last game with Jukic missing the penalty, etc. If Depor had won those, it wouldn't have been the end of the world because Madrid weren't winning them. So it is, and I don't know if it's very easy for anyone from outside Catalonia and Spain to understand, but it is yin and yang. And to be honest, there's 20 teams in La Liga every single season. Barca and Madrid normally win them all. So whenever there's someone else, it's not the most upsetting thing in the world. But back to the Cadiz game, I really do think that it was disappointing in the way that the players failed themselves, to be honest. I think that the fact that there are so many mistakes that you just cannot explain. you say sort of lack of concentration, lack of skill, lack of willingness. You can put everything into a balance, but when you try to pinpoint what it is, it's none of those, but it's all of the above. Like the Langlet thing. Obviously, you can hate on the guy as much as you want, but it's happened to everybody else. Like even Ilaix Moriba came up the other day and make a mistake. So there's been goals conceded by mistakes by Araujo, by Mingueza, by Umtiti, by Pique, obviously Langlet, several of them as well. And to be honest, they've all been at fault, even Jordi Alba. So we've considered it inexplicable at professional level and even at amateur level. Like, I've been playing football for nearly 40 years now. Even at amateur level, you don't make those mistakes. So the fact that, there's one mistake 1 week, then the next week, somehow we don't. But then the next week, we're back at it again. Like the amount of points we've given out. I mean, I don't have the calculation tally with me, but it must be at least 15 points in La Liga that we've given away just for stupid childish mistakes. And, with all due respect, because I actually really like the city of Cadiz and with all the beaches and all the surfing and the philosophy and the people of Cadiz and Andalusia. I've got nothing against them, but it's Cadiz. We've won 1 point out of 6 against Cádiz in La Liga when they were in Segunda División not that long ago. It's mind-blowing. It is ridiculous, and it's embarrassing that Barca are in this situation. And as I've already said, like especially after a defeat like the PSG, you want your team to come back biting and bouncing. And you've got the people, players with quality such as Pique, Busquets, Alba, and even Messi himself, who was nowhere to be seen against PSG in the European game. And those players especially, they've been finger pointed. They've been, in a way, singled out in the media throughout, not just Catalonia and Spain, but throughout the whole world. You would have expected there would have been some pride left and there would have been some reaction, but there was none. There really was none. Every time that either one of them missed a pass or they didn't take a shot that went the right way, they're just sort of looking at the floor, scratching their heads, and you don't really need that. And you can go back to the game before PSG when we destroyed, I think it was Alaves, we scored 5 goals, 5-1 I think it was. Ricky Puig started that game. You had Pedri, Ricky, you had Mingueza playing, and it was different. It was a different feeling. It was a different way. But obviously that didn't generate into anything much against Cadiz, and it is utterly disappointing.
Yeah, the question I ask is it disappointing because the same players making mistakes again and the same mistakes, and it's rinse, repeat all season long. And I do want to mention on the Langlet point, Langlet, as much as you can individually blame him, there was a lot of factors going in there that, again, you can't stick your leg in there. It was his 3rd penalty allowed this season. That's frustrating to see. And I was telling my wife that I for some reason, I really suppressed this memory, but back when I played, again, this was maybe 12, 13 years ago, when I was playing against our rivals. So it was our big match. It was my senior year. It was of high school. It was our big match against our rival team. And they had one really, really good player. And for some reason, my manager, I was normally our coach, our head coach. Usually I was a midfielder. And he puts me at right back for that match, where I did do a little bit of right back, but it was usually against the not so great teams. We were also not so great. So when we play the other not so great teams, I would get to play right back. But this time, instead of coming off the bench being a right midfielder, he gave me a start against our rivals at right back. And their good player was a left winger. And there was one play where my defense did not help me out, and they left me on an island with him. And he both dribbled through me and completely, I was 30 pounds. I'm tiny now. You see, I'm not that big. And I was 30 pounds or 20 pounds less than I am now. And he just physically manhandled me, Bale Bartra style. And I'm on the floor watching this guy score a solo goal. Our goalkeeper probably should have saved it, but my defense should help me. But I just looked around and everyone is looking at me on the floor going, this is all your fault. This is what you have done. We are now down 1-0 to our rival team, and you let their best player absolutely eviscerate you. And I repressed that memory deep inside me. And when I saw Langlet do that in the 88th minute, I thought, well, at least I only did in the first 10 minutes of the match.
Right. But you know what, Dan? Yeah. You were probably paying to play that match. You probably had a fee of like $5 or whatever it was, and these people get paid millions for doing this. So it's just not acceptable.
Oh, absolutely not. I would get a Gatorade or Powerade. I know they don't sponsor our show, but I would get. So the thing was, if I played really well, my father would get me a Gatorade or a Powerade for the next match. Usually it was just water. Right, water makes the world go round. So, but I get like a special like sports drink if I played well, and I did not get a Gatorade or Powerade for the next match after that one. But the point back to Langlet.
No, let's not go back because we already gone down that road. Just to say that when I was playing football in Spain growing up, whenever you got injured, there would be a big garrafa. There would be a big bottle of water, and whenever we played it was Sunday mornings, so we were around 18, 19, 20. We would have gone out the night before. Let's just say the water tasted a little bit different on a Sunday morning. Rumor has it there was some tequila put in there, but just mentioning.
Or for our kid-friendly audience, have you ever seen Space Jam? It's Michael Jordan,
yes.
his secret drink, which apparently it was just water, but tune juice. But anyway, okay. So we're gonna get back to unfortunately the disappointment. Instead of our own disappointments, let's get back to some of the things that we saw.
But the thing, Dan, with this, what's happening is that we really don't want to talk about Barca, so we're just purposefully digressing and talking nonsense.
But I do have a lot of notes though. So I think to go back to it, so Langlet, his third penalty allowed this season, and speaking again about the same players making similar mistakes, and we spoke about Umtiti where he looked good. I mean, we said for 2 weeks there, we're like, hey, could he be 60-70% of the old Umtiti? And then he had two, what they like to call disaster classes that were terrible. So Umtiti, he isn't better with the mistakes. Langlet again has allowed more penalties. His third penalty allowed this season. But I would argue that Umtiti's disasters are worse than Langlet's because Umtiti can have multiple in one game. Langlet just makes one bad mistake in seemingly almost every match, though, unfortunately. But against a low block, and the argument for me was questioning the Langlet over Umtiti in this situation. And as you know, very much where, we always bring up Pep Guardiola, but here's our one talk about Pep Guardiola. Not only was there a little bit of history where he actually made his debut against Cadiz in 1990, so fun fact there. But anyway, for against a low block like Cadiz was playing, I thought Umtiti was a much, much better choice, especially if you're going to put him next to Pique. You're not putting him next to Migueta or another, we'll say, non-talker at the back. You're putting next to Gerard Pique. So I think it's much better to have a center back that can play out of the back and dribble into the spaces that Cadiz gives you. And that was Umtiti. He's a first-team player still. Yeah, I did not think he should have started against PSG, which he didn't. He shouldn't be starting the big matches, obviously, because he's not as good as Langlet, I guess to say, in those big matches. And Pique really doesn't do much of that whole dribbling into the spaces either, unless he's heading up the goal to try to score. Pique is busy doing all the things where he's trying to organize the back line. And I can't for the life of me figure out why a back line with three veterans and Dest is the inexperienced one next to Pique as the only inexperienced one, has so many problems pushing their line and holding that offside trap, which they also struggled with against Cadiz. So my questioning there was, why was it not Umtiti over Langlet? And again, the frustration that Langlet in these matches, in these tight, close matches, he keeps making these mistakes, including against the last one against Cadiz. So I know I'm splitting hairs by saying, why was it not Umtiti than Langlet in this match? The more important thing was the other side of the field about the finishing. Griezmann, Messi, Dembele not scoring, and chances there 21-3 or 22-3 on shots, whatever the final count was, also offside 4 times. So Cadiz playing essentially that 9 at the back. Believe it or not, for Cadiz, yeah, they were solid, but it wasn't working. Barcelona kept getting in behind, and they kept getting opportunities. They just didn't finish. If any of those opportunities goes in, then we're talking about a different match. And that's continuing to be the frustrating thing, which is same players in these circumstances where it feels like a must-win match for Barca. Not against the Giants. Barcelona, Kool-Aids have almost conceded that Barca aren't going to beat Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, PSG. They're not going to beat the bigger teams or the teams they're supposed to beat this year. Instead, they're failing to beat the teams that are fighting relegation that you're supposed to beat and you have to beat. And I think the more frustrating thing was not that they didn't do well against Cadiz. The fact is, they actually broke down Cadiz because the manager Severa says exactly what Cadiz are going to do, and Koeman knew what they were going to do, and they kept getting in behind, but they could not beat that offside trap, and they also could not finish, and that winds up being the difference, I think, even more so than the defensive frailties this time around.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of points as usual in there. In terms of the defense, basically, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. really. I mean, Umtiti is not there to compete at the highest level. I think that's abundantly clear. Langlet, you wouldn't put him in the top 20 or 30 defenders in Europe at all. So the same with Pique after 3 months off from injury. You wouldn't put him in the probably top 10 of defenders in Europe right now. Dest, after injury, he's inexperienced, but that's natural because he's young. But he's coming back from injury. You wouldn't put him up there, definitely not in the form that he was. And then Jordi Alba has got a lot of players at left back that are better, and not just better. And this is a point that I've been wanting to make in the podcast for a little while now. What Jordi Alba does is good. What Jordi Alba did was great, which is being a very a great force to be reckoned moving forward. A very incisive, very ambitious left back. But there are a lot of other left backs now that are younger, more fit, more physically and mentally. I don't know if I keep saying the mental part, but I think that is the key here. That can do what Jordi Alba did, not even does, but did, and they can add a lot more physicality and they can add a lot more reliability on the defensive end. And when you put all of that into the balance, then it is natural that these players that are not they're not world class and they're not in the elite of European football, that they keep making mistakes. I mean, in the game against PSG, for example, I know we can going back to that one, but that's the biggest game we played recently. I know we played against Cadiz, but if Koeman doesn't start Pique and they get destroyed 4-0, like we did anyway, then people would say, oh, but you had Pique and you didn't choose him. So it's a lose-lose situation. Yeah. And then up front, having over 20 shots on goal and scoring only once, and it has to be because Pedri, the only beacon of hope that this season seems to be generating, should have been Ansu Fati, but he's injured as well. But it really is the one that created the goal by going into the area, doing something unexpected no one else sort of saw, or just him, to be honest, gets fouled, and then Messi scores from the penalty. That is the goal we got against Cadiz. And then we had 60 or 70 minutes, or however many they were, in which we knew that if Barca scored a second goal, if they are ambitious and they keep pushing forward to score the second goal, then the game is over. When you're playing against any team in the world, to be honest, and you got a 1-0 against a team that, or you are a team that obviously comes from the defeat against PSG, mentally weak, physically weak, then it's natural that it could unbalance the other way, and Cadiz took full advantage. And as I said before, 1 point out of 6 against Cadiz is awful.
Yeah, it was an interesting point that you mentioned about Langlet, and this is what I was thinking about yesterday too, where we've spoken about after PSG that, and I got a lot of responses here. There's a lot of names that people sent me. I appreciate that, about replacing Busquets. There were a lot of different names. I think the one that I kept seeing, and I have watched him before for Sassuolo in Italy, Locatelli. There's just a ton of different names, but I still stick to the point that Busquets in Barcelona's system is going to be much, much harder to replace. And I'm almost switching and adding on to that argument that I made against PSG, that replacing Busquets is going to be very difficult to impossible. But when I see what Clement Langlet does, replacing Langlet actually shouldn't be that difficult. If he's this out of form for this season and his market value is what it is, you can find another left-footed center back out there in the world. That list is a lot longer. The same thing that if you, I mean, I guess you could have made the argument for Arturo Vidal, and even, I mean, Rakitic is a very, very good player, so I think he's a little different, but Vidal, you have a lot of players in the world who do what Arturo Vidal did for Barcelona last year. It's not as if he was some tremendous, incredible force for Barcelona. I mean, he was the best option they had from the midfield to score, but it's not like Vidal wasn't replaceable. And instead, that spot on the roster was replaced by Mateus Fernandez. And that's the problem there, that, I could easily replace Mateus Fernandez with you and I, because we have the same, we're getting the same minutes in the Liga, right?
He's only cheaper.
Right. We're much cheaper. He only played in Champions League one time. So, right. So, I mean, in La Liga, I could put anybody else on the bench there. I mean, you could put a Cadet A player, a Benjamin A player, right? You could put a 10-year-old because he's getting the same minutes in La Liga. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like, and this is going back to the project. This is going back to Bartomeu. This is going back to the issues, not even of playing style, but of how this squad has been constructed, where Langlet looked like a good buy at the time. He looked like he came over. He wasn't necessarily cheap though. He came over from Sevilla at a pretty lofty in the mid 30s as far as the euro, the millions of euros. So it's not like he was super cheap. But that first year out of the gate, he was really good, and he's done what he does well, where he's a good one-on-one defender. He doesn't step, he doesn't overtly step, he doesn't really take chances, but he defensively is quite solid. This year, that is not the case, though. And he keeps giving up penalties in one-on-one situations. So the thing he was brought in to do the best at, he's not really working. And do you have something to respond to that? Because I want to end the show by talking a little De Jong and Puig.
Yeah, no, I don't have much to add, to be honest. It's just that we've got a club that is not managed by anybody. We don't have a chairman, we don't have a project, and this is not a thing that's happened for the last couple of weeks. This is ongoing. We haven't had any decisions, and Koeman, obviously, you can criticize him all you want. Obviously, the guy is not perfect, nobody's perfect, but at the same time, he's been the chairman, because there isn't a chairman. He's been el portavoz, so he's been the speaker. He's been the voice of Barca. He's been the one that has taken, he left the national team of Holland to join us because it was his dream job. Then he gets here. He's told to get rid of very expensive players, like Luis Suarez, for example, like Arturo Vidal that you just mentioned, Rakitic, etc. Loses all those players who, let's face it, they were quality. They were older, but they were quality. He gets no replacement. He says, I would like to sign Eric Garcia and Memphis Depay. They don't sign either. Then there's injuries to Ansu Fati and other key players as well. Even I'm going to include Sergio Roberto in there as well, to be honest, because he is someone who's been a starter for the last 2 years, and he will be working. He will be a valid player right now more than Fernandez that you just mentioned and some of the others. So yeah, he's not perfect. He could have fielded a completely different 11 against PSG. He could have made a lot of different choices against Cadiz, but ultimately he's the manager that has been appointed. He's the manager that has got the confidence of the people in charge, who is nobody, and the election keeps getting delayed. So to be honest, I think that he's doing an admirable job just making sure that the youngsters continue to grow, continue to get playing time. And I really don't know how many managers would do so much better than Koeman this season. And that's where we are. And as appalling as it is and as disappointing as it is, that is the situation now. Let's get the election done. Let's get the next president at the wheel, and then see what we can do from there.
That's the nuance of the Koeman criticism that I think so many you see. Obviously, hashtag Koeman out after the last week is what you're seeing everywhere. And there's this referendum on his entire managerial tenure and this season as a whole. And obviously, it's a lot easier to put, since there's no president to blame, where Bartomeu's gone, you've got to blame somebody. And you can't say Busquets out because he's not ever in. He's not really, he's a managing president, but he'll be out on March 7th, promise. And then, hopefully, I can promise that the election goes forward and everything happens. So knock on every part of wood you can. But yeah, then it has to be somebody else, right? Now people are saying Pique out, Busquets out, blah, 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 blah. And so Koeman, obviously, as well. So my criticism with Koeman, as we've been talking about, it's nuanced because this season, I keep saying he's doing a really good job Pedri was the best player on the field. And I think Koeman does deserve some credit for that against Cadiz. And even what he did for De Jong. So this is going to be the good and the bad of De Jong in a second. But to get De Jong to play at the level he was playing for all of January, to get Griezmann back, a lot of credit goes to Griezmann for getting himself back in form in January and early February. But I think Koeman deserves a little bit of credit too for tinkering around and figuring out how to make Griezmann and Messi work together, which takes time and takes tactics and takes ideas. And I think a lot of the ideas that he's put forward would work if Barcelona not only were not a deeper team, as in more players, but if their players were just more talented. If they just had better players, if Umtiti and Langlet were just one good player who could, if Langlet was a player who could play with the ball at his feet and dribble into space and be, adequate in one-on-one defending, you have a much better player. But Umtiti and Langlet both have their issues, so you can't really trust either of them. And then you combine that with Mingueza. Let's say you make that one full center back, and then you add the things that Mingueza does well, which he does a lot well. Then you add that into those players, and you got one really good player. But that Barcelona doesn't necessarily have that. So to go back to the nuance of Koeman, I thought that against PSG, he did the things that he had to do, and he actually had the right game plan. As I mentioned, people disagree with me, but I thought he had the right game plan for the first 30 minutes. But Barcelona aren't talented enough and aren't good enough, and so PSG outclassed them. And Mbappe is a world class. I mean, the whole argument this week is Mbappe the best player in the world now, right? We still say no, it's still Messi, but he has an argument to be. I think that's what I'm arguing. That people say, oh, Dest, whatever. Dest did an admirable job defending maybe arguably now this week the best player in the world for 60 minutes. So
can I jump in there, Dan?
Yeah.
So Messi is probably the best player in the world when he really is trying very hard and he's not looking at the floor, wandering around and thinking of whatever he's thinking. Messi in the Champions League, in the decisive matches lately, is not the best player in the world. I think that is quite obvious. I think that Messi playing against Leganés, Levante, Eibar, etc., can score for fun, yes. But I think that being the best player in the world has to be when the level of expectación, so the level of expectation is through the roof, when everyone's watching. A couple of seasons back when he played against Liverpool, he scored that hat-trick that basically had everyone's jaw dropping. That's what the best player in the world does. But when the team really, really need you, you don't show up. That to me is not the best player in the world. Maybe the most skilled, but certainly from a physical and mental perspective and based on performance today, Messi is not the best player in the world, because if he was, he would have taken the team forward and put it in his shoulder, which he didn't do. Really, really disappointed to see not just what happened, but the attitude and to then the 3 or 4 days after go back to La Liga and not being able to take your team forward like a captain does. That's not what the best player in the world does. He's the best player at Barca, hands down. And we're very grateful for everything he has done. But right now, I to be honest, I doubt that PSG or Manchester City go and pay him the money that he's being paid at Barca right now. I think that they must be having second thoughts, because you can't really stop the fact that the guy is 34 years old or 33 and a half. So I don't know if he's worth that much money anymore. And I know that we've got a lot of people listening to the podcast that love Messi inside out, and they probably hate me right now, which it doesn't matter, to be honest.
Yeah.
But because I need to speak my mind out and be honest with what I see. And what I see today is that Messi, on a great day, when everything is going the right way, then he's the best player in the world. But I think that if you are that good, then at this moment in time, you're able to overcome the hurdle that you've fallen over and over and over again over 5 years. And this is not to put the blame on him, obviously, because the team has deteriorated around him, and I've got nothing against him, of course. But to say that Messi is the best player in the world based on what we've seen this season, no.
It's interesting what you say about what could potentially, or how this recent week even would affect whether he stays or goes, and whether or not staying in this instance would actually be the best thing for him based on the other teams that are trying to bring him in. Those are interesting ideas that we're going to continue to talk about, especially when, again, the new president takes over. I do want to take this conversation and kind of end it and go back to Koeman. In speaking of, again, the broad criticisms we have about his managing the entire season and the campaign and the ups and downs of this season, and not being able to help will his veterans as well, where he takes some culpability in that, where, so many managers can get, yes, you need your captain and your leaders and your veterans to be the emotional leaders on the field, sure. But, managers who teams, you clearly see managers come in and players want to run through a wall for them. And now you're at 3.5 managers? Because I think for Luis Enrique, there at the end, the players were out on him too. So since Tito Villanova, you have not had a manager that these players wanted to run through a wall for week in and week out. He was the last one. And it really is a great what if, and the saddest what if in Barca history, maybe. I would maybe argue Di Stefano, but then it'd be an entirely different whole thing. But I think Tito Villanova is certainly the saddest what if and his health about what would happen with Barcelona, because the plan that he was taking over, that 100-point season and all of that stuff. So not since him have these Barcelona veterans, we're speaking of Messi, Busquets, and Pique, have you seen a manager that these players, again, wanted to die for, and we have not seen that, even Koeman. Now, to go off on the individual reasons why I critique Koeman against Cadiz, as I said, I actually, even though Barcelona got outclassed against PSG, I give Koeman not a pass, but I am much less likely to really critique him than I am against Cadiz, where against Cadiz, I don't want to go back to the Ricky Puig argument. It has the same argument. What I will say is Ricky Puig, when Barcelona have him on the field, they move the ball faster. And Barcelona were moving the ball too slowly. Ricky Puig should have started as he started against Alaves last week. He should have started against Cadiz because he's a player that fits what Cadiz were doing. They were doing an excellent job stepping as a unit and causing Barca to be offside. So you need a player that can break lines with his passing and is going to, you don't have to worry about him defensively, right? Puig's the whole thing is, can he get back in defensive transition? Is his, we'll say, over exuberance going to get him in the wrong positions? You don't have to worry about that against Cadiz because they weren't really counterattacking well at all. They were just playing in that low block. So he is the player that fits that situation. I'm not saying he's a starter week in and week out. I'm not arguing that he should have started against PSG. I'm saying that he was the right choice against Cadiz. And the inverse of that is that Frankie de Jong deserves to start most of the time. He's Barcelona's game in and game out best midfielder, and Pedri maybe can have that argument. However, de Jong's runs into the box are less effective with the low block. They were less effective with a traditional number 9 last year as well. And against Luis Suarez, why did de Jong struggle? Well, because he couldn't make those runs into the box. And the questions that I thought we answered about de Jong are now popping up again. And I think that for de Jong disappointed me even more. But not to immediately contradict myself, his role against PSG, that being de Jong, when the other team is coming at you and leaving space in behind, is different than his role against a team like Cadiz when everyone is behind the ball. So even if you didn't start Puig to begin the match because you wanted to get that 11 to exercise their demons from PSG, because again, Puig, why would Puig feel bad about the PSG situation when he came on in what was the 85th minute or whatever it was? So for de Jong, I actually thought he was a player that should have been replaced at halftime for Ricky Puig. That's actually where I think, looking at how Koeman navigated against Cadiz, where one of the errors were, where de Jong, not even he was poor against Cadiz, but he didn't necessarily fit. He wasn't really doing the job that you needed that midfield spot to do. And so I think for Koeman, I'm just frustrated at the choices he made. And I think that's been the case with Koeman. We've been more frustrated about the choices he's made in the matches against teams that Barcelona should be winning than against the big opponents where Barca just don't have the talent. And there's really only so much you can do in those matches.
Yeah, I think that in the biggest matches, it's more about the physical strength and the mental strength than the talent. I think the quality, arguably is there. I mean, if you pull them apart as to what they can do when they're on the ball and they're fit, then I think we've got a very good squad. But obviously, if they're not fit, football is about running. I mean, it's very clear. It's Johan Cruyff said it himself. Like, you need to make the ball run quickly, but for you to be able to move the ball around the pitch quickly and effectively, then you need to be sharp, and these players are not sharp. I think that especially, and we referred to this the other day as well, the old guard are not fresh, and when it comes to crunch time, the demons keep coming back. And I've seen this meme going around, this picture going around, saying that you can either leave a legend, and there's a picture of like Messi and Iniesta and Xavi, I think it was, and then, or you can stay in a club long enough to be the villain. Now that is, I don't want to say a bad word, but that is nonsense. Okay, I think that these Busquets, Pique, etc., they will leave the club and they will be club legends because of everything they've given. I think that people just sort of focus on the here and now far too much. The legacy is cemented, but obviously, when you've got a combination of everything and everyone falling around you and there's no replacements, then it is natural that the ones that stay the longest take the blame. And as for the current situation with the young and with Pedri and Puig, etc., there's enough time. There's 90 minutes, So even if you get the starting 11 not too right, which I think was obvious by halftime that something needed changing, then Koeman should have intervened and made the changes then. I think Ricky Puig would have been an alternative coming on. I'm still not sure what Pjanic does. I'm still not sure what he adds in any way, shape, or form. I
put him in that same grouping as Langlet, where Pjanic, for as much as he costs, I mean, there are how many midfielders in the world can do what he does? I watched the Barca B match. Ias Moriba this season is in as good a form as Pjanic. Honestly, sincerely, for what he does and offers to Barcelona, he fits into their style of play. He fits. Well, not even style of play, but he fits next to the other midfielders better than Pjanic does. He does not fit next to Pedri, de Jong, or Busquets, any combination of that three, in a way that Ias Moriba does.
Exactly. So I don't know what he adds, to be honest. Like, I keep waiting to see, right, Pjanic is coming on, all right. So he's probably wearing black and white Juventus colors underneath, and hopefully we get that Pjanic back. But there's nothing, and I'm not sure for the, what is it, 80 million euros we paid for him, and then obviously it was a hidden swap deal. I don't know what he adds, and Trincao.
You're not giving credit. You're not giving credit to the masterful genius of that account. Actually,
No.
It was Artur that went for 80, and it was Pjanic who went for 70. So Barcelona
So we made a huge profit.
A really good deal there for the player who's 7 years older.
Amazing. So we made 10 million euros so we can invest in on some Brazilian genius. So there you go. You know, it is what it is. Trincao coming off the bench hasn't added much in the last week, even though he was speaking before. So overall, we could be talking here hours, but I think it's more mental. I think that the PSG game was unexpected, and the games against Cadiz, they were still sort of knocked out, a little bit KO'd, getting back to normal. Obviously, and this is the problem. I think that culés see that Atletico Madrid are dropping points, and they keep sort of lying to them, or we keep lying to ourselves, saying, "Oh no, there is a chance. Liga, we can go there." There isn't any Liga because Barca are not going to win every game. Barca are not in a position to compete. I think that it is quite obvious in my eyes, and maybe the most pessimistic person in the world, but I don't think we're going to win any titles. I think that the most possible is La Copa. But then again, we need to put all the stars need to align, and all the players need to be geared up and need to be basically playing as if their season depended on it, because it does in that return game against Sevilla. But anything else, I think it's delusional to think that a team that gives 90 minutes of play to the old guy that we've been mentioning, that has got Pjanic as a replacement coming in, has got any chance. We don't.
Well, I'll end it where I started it, that I think with Spanish football in general, we always look at it through the lens of Barcelona, but Real Madrid haven't really been great either this season. Atletico Madrid are dropping points now finally after being much, much better than they were the last few seasons. So, I mean, as much as Barcelona aren't going to win the title, it seems like all these other teams don't really want to win the title either. So, I mean, if Barca win, I mean, they can. I mean, they can. It's like it's a matter of, I know that it's not likely to happen, but until it's mathematically over, whoever thought that Barca would even be 8 points away again after Atletico Madrid was pulling away. So I mean, it's hard to know. If Barca go on the same form they went in January and February, mathematically they will actually still be very much in the league race if the other two got points. But Real Madrid,
I think we're done. Just to the last thing, the only way that we can possibly improve what we have today is playing the kids. Just chuck them all out. Wait till Araujo recovers and put him in. Get Mingueza starting, maybe not at right back because Serginho Dest needs his time as well. Put on left back, just put even Junior Firpo in so he can, we can sell him for a profit in the summer.
Yeah.
Get a lot more minutes to Ricky Puig. Pedri has got enough minutes, so just continue to give that. The young continues to play it and obviously growing. I haven't said this in the podcast before, but I was thinking the most capable player to replace Busquets is Sergio Roberto, because he's played the whole of his Barca career, especially through the ranks. He understands the position well. And when Sergio Roberto is fit, he's actually quite speedy. He's quite robust. And obviously, he has been losing every year with the old guy, but he's not the same age. So I think that Sergio Roberto could be maybe not a starter, but certainly an alternative for someone to consider. Messi has to play. I think that he's our best player, so he has to play, but he needs to get his head back in the game. And as for the forwards, you've got to play Griezmann and you've got to play Dembélé because they are the better options you've got. I mean, with all due respect, our other alternative, who is Braithwaite, was playing at Leganés last season.
Yeah.
So you don't really.
Trincao gets his minutes too, so he'll figure it out.
Trincao gets his minutes every week. So
yeah, he does.
I think that with Dembélé and Griezmann, even if you had to sell them in the summer, which is debatable, you may as well keep them because they're not going to give you half the money of what you paid for them. Then see what happens. But I think that if you do that, then even if you don't win La Liga, which is unlikely, then at least you've got, in 4 or 5 months' time, you've got the next generation geared up and confident and ready to go, and then see what happens once Laporta comes in. He may be making some changes. He may be keeping Koeman. If Koeman stays, I think it is clear that he knows exactly what to change in the squad, etc., etc., etc. So we'll see where we are once the season ends, but we definitely need a chairman. Definitely need a president, someone who knows what to do, someone who understands the club and that can make the decisions that are much needed, that you and I have been screaming for at least 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that Barcelona don't have much time to lick their wounds about Cadiz because it's Elche on Wednesday. So Elche, I can't think of a time when Elche was this important of a match unless you put a lot of stake in the Juan Gamper trophy. So, which obviously is a fun friendly at the start of the year. So yeah, the match against Elche is just 2 days away. And these matches are going to continue on. And as I said, the rest of them are dropping points, and Barca are trying to find themselves and figure it out. And, we've been saying play the kids, and I agree. Barca B, I watch them, and if you got a midweek match, this is the moment, right? Elche is the moment when you can actually play those Barca B kids when they don't have another match midweek. So I'd love to see it. I don't know if we're going to see it, but what I do know is we'll see you back here for the next podcast, whether that is not necessarily Francesc, he's got the rest of the week off, but whether we see you for another podcast this week or we see you along with Francesc to start next week for that show. Again, there's 2 matches between then and now. So we want to thank you at least for tuning in to this one. You can tap in your app and check out the show notes to subscribe. You can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at the Barcelona Pod or LTD13 for me, on Instagram at the Barcelona Pod. Our closed Facebook group is tvpod.link/group. Deeper dives and discussion. You can also help us all on Patreon to continue making these shows at tvpod.link/Patreon. We're also on YouTube now at the Barcelona Podcast. Check us out there and hit that subscription button. And if you have this in your ears on Monday, again, there's a surprise. There's good stuff coming in the works. I'm going to say one word. Twitch is the word, Francesc. No other details, but keep an eye out on social media.
I've got no idea what that means.
He doesn't know what it means yet.
What's a twitch? Is that something that happens to you? Is that an illness? What is a twitch?
Well, I mean, they say that Ousmane Dembélé is a quick twitch athlete, but I'm not going to be speaking to Ousmane Dembélé. But there is some fun stuff in the works, as I said, so keep an eye out on that. But for now, thanks so much for listening to the Barcelona Podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barca.
Forza.